Switch, PC, PlayStation, Xbox, well, maybe not so much that last one, but we as RPG fans have an abundance of consoles we can choose from to play our favourite games. But one that is often forgotten is this little baby right here, the Nintendo DS, the best-selling handheld of all time and one of the best-selling consoles of all time commercially. And in terms of RPGs, there are some absolute bangers, and today we're going to be looking at one that is not only considered the best on the platform, but one of the best RPGs of all time. Let me introduce to you Radiant Historia. Radiant Historia was developed by Atlus and Headlock with the concept devised initially by Satoshi Takayashiki, who acted as co-director following his work on Radiata Stories. The project itself would involve further staff from that game and alumni from SMT's Strange Journey. It would release in 2010 for Japan and 2011 for the US, with the physical copy becoming a rarity even after it was reprinted in 2012. It was later noted by Atlus themselves that it was one of their most ambitious projects for the platform. Later down the line in 2017, an expanded remake for the 3DS called Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology was also released, which revised the art style and added some new content including an exclusive ending. And yeah, I took the executive decision to play this version because, well, I wanted to play the best version available. And even now, it's very easy to find praise levied at the game, with some people calling it a masterpiece. But I wonder, do those words have substance? Upon beginning, we are introduced to a world in ruins upon the fictional continent of Van Keur, where two siblings stand together in the desolate sands lamenting their most recent failure. Disheartened but not lacking in resolve though, they reconfirm that this time they will bring forth the true history. We're then given some quick exposition that Van Keur is afflicted by a desertification phenomenon, and two factions, the Kingdom of Granorg and Nation of Alastel, are at war with each other for what little arable land remains. It's in Alastel where the journey first takes roots, as an SI agent named Stock is about to embark on a mission of major importance, that being to rescue an agent behind enemy lines and bring back the information they hold. Before this mission begins, he's also given a mysterious book known as the White Chronicle, though its uses remain unknown for the time being. Oh yeah, these two are also offered to Stock to assist him on his mission. Their names are Marco and Rainey, and though they're eager to get involved for the good of Alastel, it's not like Stock needs the help. He's the best of the best, I'm sure this will be like any other... Oh. I guess they were dying to get started. So the mission doesn't go well when Stock is forced to retreat. His wounds are too severe though, and with a flash of light a pair of angels come down to take the battered agent away to eternal rest. Only in Stock's case, his angels are elf-like munchkins with fabulous robes. These two are called Lipty and Tail, and they take Stock to a realm beyond the boundaries of time called Historia. In here, they explain the role of the holder of the White Chronicle, and that with its power, Stock is afforded the ability to change history. With this in hand, Stock wastes no time in righting the wrongs of the past, and though he ends up wounded, again, he is at least able to save Marco and Rainey as well as the agent. With the mission successful, he is swiftly taken back to Alastel, where he is nursed back to health, and his longtime friend Roche, nice locks dude, tells him he has something to discuss. From this point, the timeline splits, and this is where the true events of Radiant Historia start to unfold. The main premise of the game is that two timelines are running concurrently with each other, and events between the two are intrinsically linked. To steer history to its intended outcome, Stock will play an active role in each by jumping between them at select points. His actions will either lead to the timeline advancing further towards the true history, or result in some sort of world-ending event. Damn! That's stressful, and a lot of responsibility to bear as well if you happen to get one of those bad endings. But thankfully, Teo and Lipty are there to offer a shoulder to cry on if you make a bad decision.
You've returned, Stock.
Let me say, I don't think you've made the wrong choice. I believe I might have done the same thing were I faced with that decision.
That's nice. I need some emotional support while doing this, though I guess in the grand scheme of things it doesn't really matter when I can just reverse time. When any sort of bad choice is made, stock is able to go back to a key point in the timeline and set it right. This foundation ensures that Radiant Historia is more of a show rather than tell premise, giving players the opportunity to see the what-if scenario should they come to be. It becomes one of the strongest points of the game. You don't want to see these events happen, it's a driving motif to prevent them from occurring. On the other hand, it sparks curiosity in the player in that you want to at least see how it develops, especially when given foreshadowing of a major event. This method of storytelling also aids in the individual arcs of characters related to stock during his journey. Most characters get a fleshed out arc of their own with a clearly defined structure and payoff, especially the antagonists, both minor and major, who I was a big fan of. Even some of the most loathsome characters had a sense of relatability that is so often difficult to convey. And though I wouldn't say I forgave the transgressions of a few, I appreciate that their motives were expanded upon. Now you may think that all this hopping around would cause a problem. Heck, if you're jumping between 2 points in time like clockwork, it's going to be difficult to keep up with story events, right? In truth, it's actually not a problem at all, at least for the main story. I found that many events proceeded in a rational manner and never felt lost on where I needed to go. That's also a testament to the guidance the game gives you at points, with Teo and Lipsy throwing in the odd hint to get you back on track should you fail. Take this point for example, where I'm blocked from progressing by this giant rock. As Teo so eloquently puts it,
Well, Stock, it looks like you're between a rock and a hard place.
clever. Now, the obstacle is currently insurmountable in this current timeline because the merchant who has the means of erasing it is already dead. However, by interfering in the other timeline, I'm able to prevent this from happening, thus allowing the scouts to eventually find him when I return to the original timeline that had the blockage. Is that how time travel works? I mean, if we're working off the multiverse theory here, surely going back to a different point in another timeline is going to have no effect on the timeline that I'm currently in. I'd have to actually go back to a point earlier in my present timeline in order to affect it, but if we're going off the idea that the two timelines are converging into one true timeline, and then there's the butterfly effect as well, so maybe possible histories are going to have an effect on this one as well. You know what? Whatever. It makes sense in the context of this game. Generally speaking, when you see any sort of roadblock in your way, that's your cue to switch on over and find the key that will unlock the problem. It's intuitive and also works in a narrative's favour, as you're effectively seeing both unique storylines from a first-party perspective. Again, it's more of that show rather than tell, and keeps the events fresh as you consistently jump between developments. However, it's certainly not clear of cryptic nonsense at points. In the original Radiant Historia, there were two endings to obtain, one good and one bad. Perfect Chronology adds a final true ending, and just like many true endings that involve Tri-A staff, this one is a bitch to obtain. On the timeline there will be nodes noted with a key. These are the most important quests in the game, as in order to get the true ending you must complete all of these. Now, completing them is a task in of itself sometimes, but the real challenge comes in getting them to trigger. Take this one for instance. Marco has a key quest called At Journey's End that appears quite late in the game. However, to get this to flag, you have to choose certain choices from previous events in sequential order. If you reset the timeline at any point while doing this, the quest won't show. And there's no indication of this. The hoops are already precise as is, why does it have to be a certain order as well? I had way more trouble finding the quests rather than doing them, though the actual content of said quests was worth it individually, especially for how they fed into that final ending. But it can be a lesson in frustration, especially when considering what else you'll need to contend with while finding them. And that brings us to the combat. There is a lot of fighting to be had in Radiant Historia. Fights take place on a 3x3 grid, and enemies will be placed upon it while your characters will hold in a standard column to a maximum of 3. Turn order is laid out on the other screen and battles proceed as you would expect. The real draw of Radiant Historia's combat is that it progresses like a puzzle. Your main goal is to try to stack enemies on top of each other and then unleash your heavy hitting attacks which will take them all out at once. To do this, you have abilities that push the enemy around the grid. However, to get the most effectiveness out of this, you will also have to chain turns together, because once an enemy turn comes along, they can move themselves to another point on the grid. To ensure you get several rounds of your own in a row, you have the option of changing your turns around, and you can even do this with enemies. This too though comes with a price, as it makes the character vulnerable to attacks, increasing the damage they take until their turn comes about. This battle system is defined by the amount of options it presents to you, and there's no doubt that in the early stages it's really satisfying to get stuck into this combat and see how you can make the most effective combos. As the game progresses, you'll also get a bunch of new abilities, with many of the characters having their own strengths and weaknesses. Here's the issue though for me: it gets tedious as you get further into the game. Because of the core premise of going back and forth between timelines to get to the points you need, there's a bunch of repetition to be had, including the battles. And even at higher levels, the fights that are well below your grade still require a fair deal of thought to get through. Now, some players will welcome the consistent challenge, but for me, when I'm just trying to unlock a certain node to see how the story plays out, it gets exhausting partaking in these fights so frequently. I will say though that the bosses are the exception here. They're enjoyable. In many cases, it's one enemy alone, so that omits the pushing mechanic outside of knocking them back on the grid to lower damage, but it's great to just change turn orders till you got a pile of turns yourself and basically converting that into one massive combo. Overall though, it certainly wasn't my favourite part of the game. I'm not saying I hate the combat, I just feel it has issues when considering the core design of Radiant Historia. Compounding this issue further is progression itself. Because there are two separate timelines, there are also characters that aren't prominent between them. For instance, Rosh is near on ever present in one timeline but barely used in the other, and what this means is that characters of his ilk become underleveled. Granted, Radiant Historia does offer the Vault of Time to alleviate the problem. This is clearly a grinding spot to get characters up to snuff, housing a bunch of enemies and currency to buy equipment that gradually improves at intervals. But for me, it's just a plaster to the main problem, that being the time travelling as a mechanic acts as a detriment to the overall combat structure. You want an example? Well, here you go. Look at this. I just want to get past this bloke so I can get to the story node that I need to, but he will not let me pass. Just let me through, you bloody goon. Leave me alone. Move. Move. You know what? Fuck this. I don't need to bloody deal with these guys getting in my way just so I can see how the story progresses. I'm gonna see if there's a way that I can get around this. Give me like 2 seconds. Ooh, friendly mode. Well, that sounds inviting. Okay, there's a warning message. Whatever, that's probably nothing. And, oh, look at this. One swing takes them out. Oh my god, this is perfect. Taste my blade, knave. Oh, this is perfect. You know, with this, I can do all of the key quests I need to do, and then when I get to the point of the story I need to do, then I can just change it back to how it used to be. You know what this calls for? A montage. Oh, that's it. I did it. I did all the key quests, all of the ones aboard the Dynamis are done as well. All I need to do now is change the setting back to how it used to be and... What? Why can't I change the setting back? Hold on a second, let me just check this one more time. Once the difficulty has been changed, you cannot change it back. Proceed. So a game that is all about changing time and destiny cannot change back a difficulty option. Okay. So yeah, I got about 30 hours in before I made the change, and it turned out to be irreversible. It did at least allow me to push through the later tedium of the battles, and I appreciate the option is there for perfect chronology. It's clear that it was added for those who played the original but just wanted to see the added content, though it goes without saying that I would have preferred if it gave the option to change back when you got to the points you were aiming for, but it at least does what it intends to do. With the final moment clear, the credits eventually roll, and so ends the final chapter of the White Chronicle and Radiant Historia. In short, it's a great game and well deserving of the praise that is given to it. It really demonstrated in particular that the DS as a platform could not be underestimated even for its time. It demonstrated that it too could deliver a fulfilling and complex narrative even with the limitations of the hardware compared to contemporaries. For me, Radiant Historia is not what I consider to be in my top echelon of games with the likes of Ys 8 or Aegis Rim, but it is certainly in that bracket just below. And now, if you'll excuse me, I need to try and find myself one of those limited editions. I mean, they say they're quite rare, but I mean, how bad could it be? Yeah, maybe not. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content, and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.